Have you ever been so filled with pride that God had to take you down to just about nothing to reach you? Today's guest, Dr. Dusty Brackett, knows all about it. And he shares his story of how God, in all his grace and mercy, rid him of his pride and rebuilt his life from the ground back up to help him become a man he could use for his glory. Dusty is the executive pastor at Liberty Church in York, South Carolina. He's a speaker, wedding officiant, and an author. You can find out more about Dusty through his website, dustybrackett.com. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Man. I'm Chris, I'm here with Brad, and we have another special guest with us, Dusty Brackett. He is the executive pastor over at Liberty Church, and we're going to be talking about masculinity and manhood, which, you know, we're a men's podcast. That's kind of our thing. But I mean, today, specifically, we're talking about where society tries to dictate what manhood and masculinity is. And there's clearly a swing that goes from one end to the spectrum to the other. And look, nowadays men are either toxically masculine, or they're too soft, or they're not strong enough, or they try to stand up, then they get knocked down for being toxically masculine. And it's hard to win for losing sometimes. It's also something that we learn through modeling, as from how we grow up, what our fathers say and do, that certainly picks it up. And there's a perception that tends to stick with us that we take with us in our lives. So with Dusty, I know you have a testimony and a story about this, and it's a message that a lot of men really need to hear. So can you tell us about your story and about what you were taught about manhood and what men are supposed to be? I mean, take us back to wherever you need to start.
Okay. Well, I was raised in a very strict Christian home, and by strict, I mean, I've yet to meet a family that was stricter than we were strict. And if you did have something to one up us, we'd fix that immediately. So I was raised in a home. We didn't have a television. We didn't celebrate Christmas. We didn't celebrate Easter. Of course, not Halloween. I couldn't wear shorts. I couldn't listen to any music but funeral Christian music. I couldn't go to the movies. We lived in Virginia Beach. I couldn't go to the beach. And so it was super strict growing up. And I understand my dad was trying to protect things, but my dad was a very crafty machinist, could build anything. All my life was taught these skills of working with my hands. And it did not fit me. I mean, I struggled with it. I'm the oldest of six. I have four brothers, and I'm the smallest of six. You said this podcast is about the average man. I am the below average man. I am 5'5", and I'm the smallest in my family. And I didn't fit well with the learning to weld in the machine shop, although I picked up enough skills to hurt myself. And then my dad was not an emotional man. He did not express love. He didn't tell me he loved me until we got in a fight about it when I was about 40. And that was about the first time he ever told me that he loved me. And so my mother had left us when I was 3 or 4. I don't remember her ever being in my life other than occasional visits. I had a stepmother. She did her best. She had children of her own. And so I just kind of found my own place, and I was always seeming to fight for approval in the struggle and in competition. And then, of course, being the smallest, I had a bad case of Napoleon syndrome. I walked around with a chip on my shoulder always, and any challenge, whatever, athletically or intellectually, I would attempt to do. I did better intellectually than I did athletically, especially when it came to things that involved height. But I learned a lot in life, but I just carried that with me. And my idea of what a man was supposed to be, my dad hunted, he fished, he could fix anything, he could build anything. And he taught me a lot of skills in that regard. But that was my idea of manhood. And so I came from that strict home, and I went straight out of a Christian school, straight into a strict Bible college. And by strict Bible college, I mean, there's only one version when God spoke to man, and there's only one hymn book, and there's only one way of approaching things. Yeah. I think you guys know what I mean. And I'm not denigrating that. Mm-hmm. I'm just giving you the influence that it was on me. So it developed in me, along with my Napoleon syndrome, this self-righteous holiness that I was superior to most of the other sinners in the world. And that just, along with my feelings of inadequacy, seeking my father's approval, I never really realized it, but almost created this perfect storm. And when I got married, I was a little tyrant. just to be honest with you. I was, and enforced strict rules on my family and just stomped around in my little boots around the house. And not really, that's just an idea of what, you know what I mean. Dad comes home and the law's laid down and it's this way and that way. And it's not a time of my life I'm really proud of, just to be honest with you. And I thought I was being a man, and I provided for my family, I took care of my family, but I expected to be served. My wife would bring me my meals. I didn't do laundry. I didn't wash the dishes. I worked, and I came home and laid down the law, whipped everybody, and put them to bed. That was kind of the attitude I had sometimes, and it's painful even to think about some of the things. And not in an abusive sense, but in a spiritual, emotional way. My idea of manhood was so flawed.
Yeah.
Flawed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough.
God taught me a lesson, though, because she left me. She left me. Yep. 18 years ago, this past February. So I moved into a single wide trailer by myself. And at that time, I had 4 children. And I went from a house full of noise and laughter when I came home to coming home to silence. And I went from, at that time, I was pastoring a church in Columbia, South Carolina. Of course, I lost my job. I moved back to the area where my wife moved to be with her family. I got a job working in a cotton mill on 3rd shift, and I was the only man in a whole room full of women inspecting yarn from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Talking about a beat down. That was a beat down. And so God made me do that for a couple of months, and finally I stepped up in the world and got a job as a valet, with a V, not a B, at the local hospital. But the problem was that local hospital was also the same town where I went to Bible college. And so I was regularly parking the cars for pastors and people that I knew. They didn't know about my situation. All they knew was, here's Dusty Brackett, a graduate of this college, former pastor, and he's standing there in a uniform asking to park my car. And so I had friends in the area, and one of them ran a rescue mission. And so initially he let me stay in one of their little rooms, their little guest rooms, before I rented the trailer. And he told me, he said, you can eat with the men anytime you want. And I said, I'm not eating with the mission men. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not eating over there. And they said, well, we can bring some food to your room. I said, that's more like it. And so, yeah. So after
It's all right, brother.
No.
It's all right. Nothing to be sorry about.
After about a year or 2 of parking cars, I would get my kids every weekend, just me and the 4 of them. So I had no social life. I barely made enough money to pay my bills and the child support that I owed. If I had $1 left to buy a drink at the store, I thought I was just in luxury, and got my kids every weekend. And I just focused on being a dad to them as much as I could. Picked them up from school and hung out on the weekend. No dating, anything like that. I did that for 5 years, just me and my kids for 5 years. And didn't date or anything like that. Did I mention I didn't date? I just want y'all to know. Not dating.
Dating was a little low at that time. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was wow. And so eventually, through the process of time, I felt like God wanted me to go back to the rescue mission and at least do something there. And so I sat down with the director, who was a good friend of mine, and he said that he could use me. And so for about a year, I just kind of volunteered over there and came to know the guys a little bit and ate with them a couple of times. I mean, after you've been working in a cotton mill and a valet and you're a divorced pastor, what's eating at a rescue mission? And then through the process of time, God revealed to me that he wanted me to work full time at the rescue mission. And so I said, okay. So I prayed about it, sat down with the director, and I said, man, I just feel like God wants me to quit my job and work here at the rescue mission. He said, bro, I believe that too. He said, I'm on the same page. I said, awesome. He said, there's just one problem. He said, I don't have the money to pay you. So I said, okay. I said, well, I have to pray about that. I have $1,000 a month in child support I have to pay, and my ex-wife was reminding me that I'd go to jail if I didn't pay it, and a gift of encouragement. But I remember one day, my youngest at that time was about 5 years old, and he would climb up on top of the Jeep Cherokee that I had, and he would jump to me, Daddy, catch me. And usually Daddy catch me and the jump were almost simultaneous, and so I had to be ready to get him. And I remember that particular day, I was struggling with the decision about what to do, feeling like God wanted me at the mission, but knowing this and just really humbled by all of this. And that day he ran to me, and as he got to the edge of the Jeep, he just turned around backwards and just did the Nestea plunge into my arms. And when I caught him, it wasn't audible, but in my heart, God said, trust me, just like that. Just like that. I said, okay. And so I went to the hospital. I said, turn in my notice. And they said, what are you going to be doing? I said, I'm going to be working at the rescue mission. They said, oh, that's wonderful. You're fulfilling your calling. It's awesome. They said, what will you be making? I said, nothing. They said, you're an idiot. What are you doing? But I worked there 5 years, 6 years. I never missed a child support payment. Not one time. Got to pay my bills. Now, there were some struggles, some things he taught me. But in that process of working at a rescue mission in obscurity for 5, 6 years, no one knew who I was. No one asked me to come preach or anything. God was teaching me that real manhood is servant leadership. It is laying down my life for other people. It was easy for my children to lay down my life for them. That's easy. It's natural. But for the mission men, it was more difficult. But I found after being there for 5 or 6 years that those really are my people. And I readily identify with them because God has shown me more grace than he showed them, because to whom much is given, much is required. And I had way more advantages than they did, being raised in a Christian home, never went to a public school, Christian school all my life, straight into Bible college, straight into working in the ministry, had all of these benefits and things. And then I couldn't keep my marriage where it needed to be because of my pride and my arrogance. And so in the process of time, I began to teach my boys things about how to be a man. And it wasn't just the skills with the hands or the masculinity of muscles and things. I could stand up and show you just how pitiful it is, but it was that manhood is that inner strength of a quiet walk with God, a behind the scenes strength, meekness that illustrates itself from approaching people not with need, but with the ability to help and the desire to lay down and be spent for others. That's what I learned. I don't fulfill it, but I've learned it in theory, and I'm learning to practice. And Chris sees me at church. I still walk around like I'm about half mad all the time, but I'm learning to process it.
No, not true.
So yeah. So that was my life lesson on manhood. And I learned a lot of it in those 5 years of living alone, working at the mission. And then so after a period of time, one of the guys in our mission, his sister showed up at one of our meetings, and I met her. And she started dating a guy on my staff. And he didn't know what he was doing. And so I waited about 5 months for him just to burn it down. And I stepped in and rescued her. And so Anna and I got married about 13 years ago. And I do a lot of laundry. I do the dishes. I mow the grass. And all of the things that I didn't do the first time, I just tried to seek to lay down my life for her. And of course, God gave us gave me another child, she and I together. And I have children who are 27, 25, 22, 21, and 5. That in itself is a different kind of manhood that I'm learning, but it's been good.
Gosh, there's like, I just want real quick. I don't even know where to start, because like your journey, clearly God was like, all right, I'm gonna rip all the pride out of you. And who knows? I mean, I've my testimony's on here too. Like I was on the side of the road bawling, but it's just interesting because who knows how many times God tried to do that. And then it was like, and usually this is what happens, right? He's like, all right, well, I got to rip the pride out of you somehow. Like you are going to go sit and eat with those dudes. Like you're not going to be in your room. Yeah.
Bro, I had a
But
lot
it's
of
just,
meals.
your story that's amazing. It really is. I know it's tough to talk about, but it is just like strict home. I say that I grew up in a strict home, but not like that. And I went to Bible school too. My Bible school was probably the more liberal arts Bible school out of all of them, right? So that wasn't even that strict. And I just,
Is he saved, Chris?
yeah. I mean, hey,
Not sure.
No, it's just I almost. It's just so hard to express. Like, I don't know. It's just amazing. It's always hard to express what God's done, but it's like amazing to hear you say like, this is where I was, this is what I was doing, and on the outside, that looks like that's a good way to do it, right? Like I'm doing all these things and now I'm pastoring. And then next thing you know, you're living in a single wide trailer and then getting, even when you talk about parking cars, right? Like when you were talking about that specifically, I was like, wow, how many people won't do that because of where they're living, right? Like how many people won't, their pride is God's like, I got to get this out of you. I want to do so much in your life, but you're too prideful. And seeing people that they're like, no, you were a pastor, you were doing all these things, like, and now you're grabbing my keys to park the car. Like, wow, how humbling, but not in a bad way, I guess. Like, I don't know how to explain it, where it's like, it is a bad thing, right? Like, you're like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, if you look at it from like God view, it's like, don't worry. Like, this is, I got to get you here because I want to get you there, right?
Training grounds.
Exactly. Yeah. And my dad, for all of his strictness, had a lot of wisdom about the Bible. And he used to always tell me, and when my life fell apart and everything, and he told me, he said, first of all, don't chase her, chase God. He said, don't chase another woman, chase God. He said, and remember that in your life, every humbling step is a forward step. He said, so don't resist it, embrace it.
Yeah.
That's what he told me. He said, God resists the proud.
Yeah, that's a word.
Gives grace to the humble. And so I wish I could stand before you and say I'm the humblest man on this campus. I know better, but I am learning it and trying to teach my kids that as well. And it's weird because as I worked at the rescue mission, we opened up a branch in Rock Hill, kind of merged with another one, and I moved down here to take over that branch. And my kids attended a Christian school in York, South Carolina, and I would go to the basketball games and watch them. And because my ex-wife taught at that Christian school, I sat on the bleachers by myself. Who wanted to talk to him? So there's this cop who comes in and he watches his kids play the games, and I go over and talk to him because he's alone too. And I meet Matt Burrell, who eventually becomes the lead pastor of Liberty Church. And I started going to church there with the men in the rescue mission that I was over. And in the process of time, 8 years ago, he hired me. And then we acquired the property where the Christian school used to be. And now the gym where people ostracize me is the worship center where I'm the executive pastor. It's just like God says, look, I just weave all of this stuff around.
It's almost like God gave you a footstool.
Yeah, it kind of is. And so it's an awesome thing, and I'm extremely grateful to be here. And over the time, as the staff has grown, my oldest son works here as our creative arts pastor and worship leader. My 21-year-old son is in North Greenville and drives home every weekend to run our broadcast media and stuff like that. So I get to work with my kids too in the ministry. So, but I want to tell you this: there were some rules that I came up with for my boys for manhood, and Yeah, so I had three boys and one girl at that time, and the girl is the second in the birth order, and I would take her on dates and do stuff with her. But when they would come over on the weekends, we would have men's meetings, and so I would ostracize her to the bedroom or somewhere, and so we could have our men's meeting. And I would teach them the rules, my rules of manhood, and had nothing to do with strength or anything like that. The first rule was that men always obey authority. They obey all authority. Where it's God, your parents, the policeman, men obey authority. We're under authority, we obey authority. The second rule is that men always treat women with respect and dignity. Beginning with your sister, your mother, you're always protecting them. They don't always need it, but we don't give it because they need it. We give it because we honor and respect them.
That's right.
The third rule was that whatever we do, we always do our best as unto the Lord. And so whatever we want to do, if it's worth doing it right. And we're going to do it. And then the fourth rule was that we love the brothers. And this always came into a big bear hug that rolled out to a big wrestling match and a big fight. Usually ended up one of us mad at the other for something, but it gave time for us to put the rules into place of obeying authority, loving women, and doing our best and loving the brothers. And my last rule was that a man always, these are just stuff that I came up with in my life, so I was just teaching them. A man does what he's supposed to do, even when he doesn't feel like doing it. And to teach them that it's time to get out of bed, you've got stuff to do, you got to go to school. It's not an optional thing. There'll be a day when you have no choice but to get up and go to work because you have bills to pay and people who are expecting you to perform and do your job so you can take care of them. And while I don't have a problem with you laying on the couch playing video games, you shouldn't be doing that at 35 on a Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. You should be at your job somewhere. So that's what I was trying to teach them in that regard. Yeah. And just that attitude of living a life of service outside of themselves. So that's kind of where
I love those.
The things I learned.
Yeah, those are awesome. Those are great.
I love them because everyone thinks that manhood has to deal with strength. And it really doesn't. I mean, really, like when you get down to it, it really doesn't. A man in general is going to be physically strong enough to do what he needs to do, right? But the strength, that servant, I mean, all the rules that you gave circle around being a servant leader, right?
That's
like
what
they all do. And that's exact, like you hit it earlier when you were talking about it. You hit it on the nail. Like that is what manhood, like your definition of manhood. I love it because of that servant mindset. That is what we're here to do. Jesus, the ultimate in manhood, right? The ultimate. Like those guys would not have followed him if he was just like, some tree hugger hippie, like everyone always, praise him, right? Yes. Like none of those guys would have followed him. The ultimate man, and all he did there was serve people.
That's right.
And those rules, I love those rules. Gosh.
Well, when I came to Liberty for the first time, we had some kind of dinner on the grounds. I don't remember what it was, but I watched Matt, our lead pastor, and he didn't eat. He just fixed people's drinks, took their plates, threw their trash away, cleaned up. I never saw him eat the whole time. And then a few days later, I came to the church, and he was in the parking lot putting an alternator on a car. And I said, "Hey, man, is your car broken?" He said, "No, it's this lady that lives down the road. She stopped here, and the car was broke, and I'm putting an alternator on it." And I looked at him. I said, "Who paid for the alternator?" And he said, "Well," I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's what we're called to do, right?" And so we try to teach that culture at our church, is that the staff are servant leaders, and we have titles and obligations and spheres of responsibility. But at the end of the day, it's to lay down our lives for God's people as God has laid down his for us. That's kind of our philosophy. Some days I nail it.
Yeah.
Some Sundays I'm the little tyrant again. And so I'm not sure which one Chris gets from time to time. But
No, see, and I know you're joking, but just to put this plug, because he won't say it for himself, because Dusty's wanting to run himself down. Sure, we all have the struggles. And that's part of the dying to ourselves daily, right? That's part of God not being done with us. But for somebody who I guess if you could say that you struggle with pride and all that, which, okay, we all do,
Hmm.
but to be vulnerable and to share how you shared and shared what you shared with us and with the rest of the guys out there, look, that takes a lot of strength.
Yeah.
That's a real big show of manhood, and that's not like being prideful. And truly is an example
Hmm.
of what it takes to be a man, and is certainly not an example of being a little tyrant and being prideful about yourself.
Well, it took a lot of prayer, and I've been sick to my stomach most of the day. So there you go.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Brother, I'm so sorry.
Uh,
Well, God had told me, kind of given me some direction about what I needed to talk about, and yeah, that's what I was dreading. Not so much the podcast part. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
it literally I don't know. I mean, I hope, I know someone's getting something out of this. I know I'm getting out
Mm.
of it. So I know that someone hearing this, especially when you go to God before something like this, and He's like, "This is what you're going to share," and yeah, someone out there right now. I mean, I seriously have a hard time to even like grasp all the things and say what I want to say about your testimony, just because it's an amazing testimony. I mean, even to the point of the Christian school. Now that's a campus, the basketball court right there. Like, that's where we
Yeah,
do
yeah.
service. I sat in that corner. No one talked to me, and look what's going on now. I mean, that stuff is
Yeah.
just, it's crazy.
For a long time, I used to sit on the stage almost in the very spot where the bleacher used to be, where I sat in obscurity. So God. It's kind of sometimes that I'm not Joseph by any means, but God's
Yeah.
like, hey, watch this. I
Yeah.
can turn this around. And not in one-upmanship. Some of those people kind of ostracized me initially. We become good friends.
Yeah.
Even my ex-wife and I are good friends, and she still lives in the area. She's come to the church from time to time, and we have a great relationship and things like that. And she knows she made a terrible mistake leaving a quality man like me. And so, but I'm just grateful. I got 3 granddaughters
That's awesome.
now, and a 5-year-old. So I'm blessed
Yeah.
way beyond what I deserve. Yeah,
And you
way beyond.
you built legacy, right? Like
Mm. Yeah.
you broke what was probably too legalistic, right? And
Oh,
yeah, right.
yes.
And like, you broke that,
Good.
even though it was coming from a
Yeah.
good place. That doesn't mean it's not coming from a good place, but you broke that, and through a divorce and through all this, like where you're at now, where you're good friends, you can have a conversation with your ex-wife. You're married, you have a child with, like all these things, and then the grandkids. Like it's building a new legacy. It really is, and it's amazing. It's a miraculous story.
Well,
Well, that's
I'm
what I
so
love about it. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
was just going to say, what I love about it is the fact that you stuck it out. Right now, you may have at times didn't feel like you have a choice, but ultimately, right? God, when God was refining you, right?
Yeah.
You stuck it out, and then you turn around, and not only just at first you had some resistance, and all that, but then you circled back around, and not only did the things that you may have been initially resistant to, you stepped into strongly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think it's awesome.
Well, to God be the glory, and I just see the long way I need to go, but I'm glad that He can get some benefit from what He's been doing in my life, and I'm just praying for His continual use and lead. I'm 53 years old, and just trying to see how He wants me to end it, and not like end it like next week or anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to end it, but you can't see my chalkboard on here, but I have a big 17 written on it, and the staff always asks me, "Why do you have 17 written on your board?" I said, "Well, if my average life expectancy is 70, I said that's how many years I have left, and that's the reminder for me to don't waste a whole lot of time, get busy doing something." And so I'm excited about what He has for me in my sunset years here. So we'll see. And next year I'm going to run with Chris in the 5K. I was in a boot this year.
Oh,
And
man.
yeah, I saw his scores, his times. I'm sure I can beat that.
Yeah,
And
you can do it. You could do it. Well, you know what? They were close, but really tight. I mean, I think we're talking fractions of a second between me and the woman who came in second in the 70s and over. So
I love it.
Yeah, but I saw you wearing the medal Sunday morning, so I know the deal.
Walked into the church parking lot with my medal on.
Yeah, I saw you.
Well, that's what happens when not enough guys show up for a race. So, we'll see what happens next year.
I'm changing it. That's right.
Yeah. Well, so just hearing all the different ways, because you spent, like you said, years just alone. I mean, it was you and the kids, or if you didn't have the kids, it was alone. There was a lot of period through that where God's refining. And then now the community, I don't want to say you went through a Job time, right? But how God still restores.
Mm-hmm.
God's in the restoring and redeeming business.
I know what you mean by that. I deserved mine. Job didn't. And so even in those 5 years, one of the things I tried to do was to maintain my father's rules. I didn't have a television. So it's a quiet house, and I didn't have a TV I could turn on. And if I had to do it over again, I'd get a TV like day one.
Yeah.
Probably. Just leave it on 24 hours a day so I could have somebody talking in the house. I don't know.
I have to travel for work, and the first, maybe night or two, the first day or two that I'm in a hotel, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Like it's a little bit quiet, a little calm, kind of chill. After that, like I just leave the TV on until I go to bed. I'm not even watching it. Like I just turn it on and I'm like doing whatever, and I leave. I come back. I just leave it on because I'm like, I need noise. Like this is too quiet.
Exactly.
This is ridiculous.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. So yeah.
It's definitely, it's definitely great to see how God works and how we're made for relationship. We're made to be around people. So we definitely feel that deficit when it's not there.
I'm not a super social guy anyway. I'm a little more introverted than, of course, Matt Burrell is. And he walks in, everybody runs to him and from me. And but even the 1,800 nights I spent alone were too much. And but in those nights, so I got to tell you one story. So I came home in my period of working at the mission and turned on the light when I came in the trailer, and the light didn't turn on. And I was like, what's up? It's the wintertime. You know how well insulated trailers are. It was balmy in there. And I realized that they had turned my power off. And I was like, okay, well, I thought I had a few more days. And in those days, I was not looking for the due date. I was living for the cutoff date.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
You've been there before. I don't know. But I immediately, when I realized what had happened, God said to my spirit, he said, don't tell anybody. Don't tell them. Just trust me. Don't tell them. And so I got my blanket, my flashlight, my Bible, made me a little tent, put it over my head, and I tried to read and went to sleep. The next morning, I couldn't take a shower because my well worked through electricity and not pressure. So couldn't take a shower, so I got my clothes. I snuck into the mission early before anybody was up so I could take a shower so no one would know. But my clothes were all wrinkled, and I'm pretty particular about that. But I couldn't do anything, and then so I worked. I came home. The fish in my fish tank died because they froze. That's how cold it was in the camper, in the trailer. And I pulled my blanket over my head and got my flashlight. And God met with me in that room. I can't explain it to you, but my heart was so warmed by his presence that I slept the best I could sleep that night. And I got up that next morning. Of course, it's freezing in the house. I couldn't take a shower. I went to scrape the frost off my truck, but I didn't care anymore. I mean, God had met with me, and I was just like, if he knows, I don't care. And so I went to work and just embraced it as a humbling step. I can't even keep my power on. Started getting toward the end of the week, and I said, God, my kids are coming over on Friday, and I got to have heat. And I said, church is coming Sunday, and I sure can't go to church all wrinkled up like this. I mean, it's an abomination. And so God gave me the liberty. He said, well, you can talk to the director about it. And that's where I usually went when big expenses were coming up or something, because I wasn't getting paid consistently. When I went to speak to him, he said, bro, why didn't you tell me? I said, well, God wouldn't let me. He said, yeah, but how can I tell the men that God will always meet their need if the director's power is cut off? I said, God did meet my need.
Mm.
I needed to be humbled. I needed to learn to be grateful.
Mm.
I needed to learn to identify with these homeless guys who come here who've been sleeping on the street.
Yeah.
I need to learn to not take him for granted.
Mm.
That's what I needed. And he supplied my need
Mm.
by turning off my power. And he wrote me a check, and it was only like $130 or something. It was not a lot of money at all. And got the power turned back on. And the next morning when I took a hot shower, I said something I'd never said before. Thank you, God, for hot water.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you, God, for a warm house. And on that Friday night with my kids gathered around me,
Yeah.
I said, thank you, God. And it was just that understanding that sometimes I feel like we preach, God meet my needs. We're supposed to have uninterrupted prosperity,
Mm.
or God's not doing his job. But sometimes you need a whooping.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a reminder. And he's faithful to meet your need, whatever that may be, in the negative sense. And it's all part of that humbling
Yeah.
that we can learn so that we may be exalted for further service. And I'll never forget that. And
Yeah.
rest in peace, fish, I guess. It was worth it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, what a powerful message and perspective.
yes.
That gift of the perspective that God had given you in that time. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of us do see that as somehow God's failing us, or God, why are you letting this happen to me? Why are you putting me through this? What's the purpose from that? I shouldn't have to suffer like this. But what you're saying is it was uncomfortable, but that sounds like it was one of the times you were closest to God.
Yeah.
No
And
question.
really felt his hand and his presence.
No question. Absolutely.
What a
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a gift.
And if I could replicate that by not paying my power bill now, bro, they'd turn it off today. And just to experience his presence like that
Yeah.
again, for sure. Yeah. It was worth it.
Gosh.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, you know what? I did have a final question, and I didn't prep you for this, so I can understand it if that's something you need to chew on. But the question is, what advice would you give to any men who are running into any struggles that you've run into?
Okay.
That they're currently in it now, and that's something that you've gone through.
Well, I would remind them that from my experience that any circumstance in my life that forces me to Jesus
Mm.
is a positive circumstance,
Mm.
even if it does not appear to be so in the moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in that sense, and please understand, but in that sense, I'm thankful my wife left me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I'm thankful for the 5 years of a trailer by myself. I'm thankful because they drove me to Jesus, and my relationship with him is so much deeper and more real to me than they ever were before. And I can even remember my daughter telling me very young, she said, Daddy, before, even though you were home with us, we didn't know you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Gone all the
Mm.
time, and you were distant and involved. She said, but now I know you much better, and I love you, and I'm glad that we have this relationship. And if I had to go through with what I had to go through to get that, I'm so grateful for those things. And so when you find yourself in those circumstances that just seem to be destroying your life, in whatever measure you can, embrace them as a gift from God. Because on the other side of that is some really great things
Amen.
that God wants to do in your life. He does.
Yeah.
And if you're drawing breath, he's not finished. He's
Mm-hmm.
not done. And this process is to produce more fruit and a pure sense of gold than he ever could have done before. And some people can go the easy way. I did not. I went the hard way.
Yeah.
And but here we are. I'm thankful for his patience and long suffering. And
Amen.
grateful.
Amen
Yeah,
to that.
sure.
That's some
powerful.
advice for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I totally
That is
understand what she's,
powerful.
like we tell when my wife and I are helping people or whatever, talking about this, I wish I would have never done anything I did. Like I wish, if I can go back, I would not have done it.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm like, man, because of that, this is where I am with my walk with God. Because of that, this is where, and it's a weird conundrum to be in. But I totally, when you said that, I 100% relate. Like, I'm like, yep, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you know what? Let me go ahead and wrap this up. And just because we are so blessed for this story, so blessed for your honesty and your willingness to obey God's prompting, despite the anguish that you may have been experiencing today. So sorry about that. But we are so grateful that you endured that for our sake, for the men's sake who are listening. And so just to put a top on this, you're thinking that the average man, right, will conform to what society says about manhood, but he's also going to fight against God's correction, against God's guidance, and he's going to miss out on some bigger blessings because of it. He's going to have the wrong perspective. The above average man, he focuses on what God says, and what God says is a good man, and what God says is a godly man. And when God starts to begin that refining process, although it's not pleasant, it doesn't have to say, "Oh God, thank you," right away. But he draws closer to God, and he has faith in that God is doing a work, and God is good, and God is faithful. And so he endures with God, knowing that whatever God has in store for him is always better than what we could be doing or have in store for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So men, go out there and be better than your average man. Dusty Brackett, thank you so much. It has absolutely been a pleasure. It really has been a blessing, and I know it's going to be a blessing to the guys who are listening.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Now that I'm done with it, I realize that the Lord's hand was in it, and I should have just embraced it. Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk about it.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time.